Welcome, folks, to episode number 2 of brushes in Illustrator. So this is going to be the scatter brushes, which are the second in the series. And scatter brushes are, like all the other brushes, kind of unique in Illustrator, but this one's a lot of fun. So we're going to show you how we're going to create a scatter brush. When you go to your brushes drop-down panel and you create new brush, if you don't have any artwork selected, scatter brush will be grayed out. Make sure you select something before you choose the scatter brush. So I'm going to select this rounded square, go to the drop-down menu, new brush, create a scatter brush, and click OK. Now with this, I'm not going to change anything. I'm simply going to call up my scatter brush options and click OK and be done with that. So let's see what the scatter brush does when I go in and grab my brush tool, which is the letter B. Now I'm going to paint a line, and there's my scatter brush. It's going to give me the exact size of my original artwork painted along that line. Now I'm going to double click on the scatter brush icon in the brushes panel to change some of the attributes, making sure that the preview button is checked. I'm going to scale down the size, and this is going to take the size of my initial artwork and scale it down, keeping the line the same or the brush path the same and just scaling it down. So I can scale that up or down after I'm done with what I've worked on. Now I can also control the spacing, so I can tighten up the spacing so it becomes closer or further apart. And another cool thing that I can do is I can also do this thing called scatter. Scatter allows me to move it. I don't have to move it much. You can see that it does a lot in a little bit of time. It just takes and basically scatters it off the path. So as I go and increase or decrease that number, it will just basically randomly scatter that off the path itself. A negative number is going to go below the line. A positive number is going to go above your line. The rotation can also go in and rotate everything at the same rotation. So this is a lot of cool stuff that you can do. And it's just a matter of going in and editing these size, spacing, scatter, and rotation. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to apply that to my stroke, so now I have that. Now, that's just going in and using the brush tool and simply painting a line. What happens if I go in and, say, do an oval and apply that brush to it? Well, simple. There's my scatter brush, and all those settings that I had in there allow me to go ahead and apply it to the scatter brush. Now, one unique feature here that we can do is go under the brush options and click on the drop-down menu, and I can set options for the selected object or brush options overall. If I do options of the selected object, that will allow me to go in and change only the selected object here, and then I don't mess with all the other objects that I've been working with, and it keeps everything in line with what I want to have without changing every single thing on my page. So that's just the selected object. Now this seems a little bit out of the ordinary, and you're wondering, it's like, okay, why would I want to use something like this? Well, there's a couple of reasons, and I'm going to show you those reasons. I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab a different shape here with the star. And I'm going to create a new brush, and that of course is going to be a scatter brush, and click OK. And what I'm going to do here when I create this scatter brush is I'm going to keep all the settings the same, click OK. And then I'm going to grab my brush tool and I'm going to paint a line with this scatter brush. Now I'm going to edit this scatter brush, but I'm going to introduce a little bit more fun to this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a random component from the drop-down menu next to size, spacing, scatter, and rotation. This will allow me to have my preview button checked so I can see what's going on. The randomness allows me to control the random size, so I can go larger and smaller here. And when I choose random, then I can choose both the large and the small size. When I do spacing, I can do random, so I can have it tighter together, and then I can also do random looser together. Scatter is where things start to get fun. I can reduce the scatter here, and then I can also, with a random, do it here. So I get a lot of these stars going all across these paths here. And then I can also do a random rotation too, where I can rotate these to any rotation that I want. And I'm going to apply this to the strokes once I click OK. Now if I go in and I do some fun and funky thing, this will give me what looks like a completely random size, spacing, rotation, and scatter effect without having to go in and draw hundreds of different objects, which is really, really, really nice. I love this feature. That's one thing that I really enjoy. Now keep in mind that when you go into any one of these scatter brushes here, you don't just have the random, which by the way is cool. All these other grayed out areas are areas that are there if you have a stylus and tablet. Once you apply the stylus and tablet and load in the software, you will be able to control the size, spacing, scatter, and rotation with all these different inputs from your tablet and your pen, which is really cool. So nice features. Scatter brush is really cool, and it's all fun and good. But what I want to do is I want to show you this colorization method, because here's one thing that's very interesting. Once I go in and I do my scatter brush here, I am allowed to go in and change the stroke of the line, which will change the overall look and feel of my scatter brush. But one thing I can't do is go in and change the color. I'm going in here and applying a different stroke to the color, and you'll notice that my stroke is not changing color. And the reason why is because when I built this, I built it with this particular color, so that's the color that stays with it. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try a little bit more fun. I'm going to grab two components here, and I'm going to grab this arc and this circle, and I'm going to make a scatter brush here, and I'm going to show you how this colorization method works. So I've selected those two, created a new a new scatter brush. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. And I'm going to click OK. So there's my scatter brush. Again, I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to go in and move this out of the way, grab my brush tool, and I'm going to paint a freeform line here with those items for the scatter. I'm going to go into my scatter brush here, and I'm going to make them significantly smaller, and I'm going to tighten up the spacing too. There we go. I'm not going to mess with the scatter or rotation. I've already showed you that. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to change the method of colorization. Now we have no colorization, which is what I showed you. You can't go in and afterwards apply a different color to the stroke and colorize this. So the three different methods we have are tints, tints and shades, and hue shift. Now if you don't know anything about this, well, click on the light bulb here and what it's going to do. It's going to show you exactly how this works. So if I go in and I paint something with my scatter brush, which is what I've done here, if I change the color of the stroke, nothing happens when we choose none. But if I choose the tint portion of it, when I go in and I change the tints here, it will change the tints relative to the colors that I have in my stroke. If I do tints and shades, it will go in and allow me, based on the location of these colors in the color wheel, to change the tints and the shades based on the saturation and the colors that I choose. And then you have hue shift, and it's like, okay, this may be getting away from you, so let me just show you how this works. I'm going to choose tints, and I'm going to click OK. I'm going to apply this to my stroke. Then I'm going to go to my selection tool, and I'm going to select this stroke. Now I'm going to go into my color panel, and I'm going to apply this, and based on the saturation of those original two colors, I'm going to go ahead and apply different stroke colors, and you can see that based on the saturation of those colors, I can apply the tints. Now I'm going to go back to double click on the thumbnail for the scatter brush, and I'm going to choose the next method, which is tints and shades. When I click OK, I'm going to apply this to the strokes. And tints and shades will now be allowed to go darker and lighter, because a tint is when you lighten a color, shade is when you darken a color. So if I go in here and apply orange, you can see that the original magenta is now a little bit more saturated, and the blue is a little bit lighter, so it's going to reflect those tints and shades based on the colors that I choose. Both those shapes will be that color, but it'll match the tint or the shade of that original color. Lastly, I'm going to go back into my scatter brush icon and double click, and I'm going to choose hue shift. Hue shift is really interesting because if you do nothing here and you simply click OK and you apply that change to the strokes, I'm going to go in and I'm going to start to apply different colors. And you'll notice that sometimes the colors change, and other times it looks like it's tinting and shading here, and you're wondering, okay, what is actually going on with this? Well, it's all based on the relative color location on the color wheel, and if you choose a color that is opposite or complementary or triadic, or whatever your color method may be, you're going to get that applied to the color of your strokes. Now, that's not really what tints or hue and shift is made for here. It's made to go in so you can actually go in and change one component or the other. So here, you think you could click on this little color square and pick up a color. No, you can't. So you go in and you click on your eyedropper tool and you try to click every place else, and that doesn't work either. Well, this doesn't work like it works in any other location or any other application or anything else in the world I've ever seen. How this works is really quite bizarre. You choose your color, key color, and you click on your eyedropper tool, and then you click on the color that you would like to change from the thumbnail on the right-hand side. If I choose my color picker, and then I choose the blue or the cyan from here, and then I click OK, and I apply that change to my strokes. Now when I go in and I apply that color, that is going to be the predominant change that's going to happen based on the color that I chose of my circle. If I go back in here and I choose my eyedropper tool and I click on my magenta arc and then I click OK, and I apply that change to my stroke, and now I go in and I change the color. That will allow me to change the color, and that is the color change that's predominant. And then whatever portion of the color wheel that I pick, it's then going to correlate to the change of the color here. Now this may not make any sense at all, and I can understand that most people don't sit here with a color wheel to find out where the colors sit, and if you're picking an opposite or a complementary or a triadic color, it doesn't make much sense. But that's how you can go in and later on change the color of your stroke after you've gone in and turned it into a brush. So if that's my hue shift and I only have one color, I change the hue shift. This will now allow me to apply that change to my stroke, and now I can go in and I can shift the hue of that and actually change the color of my stroke afterwards. It's a unique situation. It's not the only brush that does it, but that's the scatter brush pretty much in a nutshell.